Electrocast.
Cars say a lot about who we are.
It represents freedom for a lot of people.
This season on Drive, I'm going to talk to all sorts of different people.
I looked at car names.
Yes.
And
yes.
I found all the car names that have science or astronomically
it's
inspired.
Crazy.
It's huge.
It is. Yes, I happen to be CEO of Ford Motor Company. For me, it's all about cars, movement, and our mutual passion for things that get us around. This is Drive, and I'm Jim Farley.
Easter's in full bloom at Whole Foods Market with great deals on spiral cut bone-in ham and leg of lamb, both crowd pleasers. Round out your spread with quiche, deviled eggs, and delicious catering platters from Prepared Foods. Oh, and remember to pick up a Whole Foods Market bunny cake from the bakery. Strapped for time? They cater too, with delicious options available without the effort. Find hundreds of Easter deals and delights now at Whole Foods Market.
Hold on to your butts.
We are changing the course of history as we see it. That is what Western demands.
Now this affects Iris. Iris, where are you?
What you feel only matters to you.
I do not entertain hypotheticals. The world as it is vexing enough.
Iris, I have a tip for you.
Don't take drugs!
Or Whatever Movies with Wesley and Iris.
What up? Welcome to Or Whatever Movies. I'm your co-host, Iris, and I'm here with my older brother,
Wesley.
Today, we're talking a movie from 2022, available on HBO Max, The Menu.
The Hunger Games.
Nice. Or is it really just Ratatouille?
Is it? Hong Chow throws down.
Hong Chow throws down?
Yeah, finally. We got to see her fight. We were waiting for her to fight in the whale.
The lead disciple, the maitre d' for Hawthorne?
The only real fight scene. Do you, on date nights, do you ever do like food yuppie Hawthorne style eateries?
Well, 2, maybe 3 weeks ago, we went to the Pasta Bar. Or maybe it's just Pasta Bar. And we should have known that this place was going to be really nice. Neither of us knew what to expect. We were pretty dressed down, but it was a super, super foodie place. It was definitely the menu style, if not level place, but menu style place. The host lets you in, and then you're seated at the bar, and you only have one choice of cocktail. And it's this, very small select group of people. You're then ushered into the open concept kitchen/restaurant together. You're seated and it's the whole nine with the foodie presentations by each of the sous chefs, and then the visit by the sous chef and the wine pairing with the sommelier and blah blah blah.
Man, the deceptively named simplistic The Pasta Bar. It could be Pasta Bar at Downtown Disney.
Exactly. I was expecting that it was going to be cafeteria style soup plantation.
Right?
Build your own pastas.
But this is but it's got a rock solid rigatoni or something, right?
Right. And I was like, this is not okay. Like, this should definitely be some kind of special occasion, like once in a lifetime meal. And here we are on a random Friday night in like jeans and sweaters going to Pasta Bar. It was very nice, and I know that this is not a foreign experience to you because you've had a number of experiences like this, and I did want to ask if you consider yourself a foodie.
I consider myself a foodie, but in a different way than Nicholas Holt's character. When you went to the Pasta Bar and they sat down and the sous chef came by and you were limited to one specific cocktail that they had planned out and everything to the letter, were they rude to you? Like... This, I understand, I came to understand what this movie was about, but when they sat down, it never didn't feel rude. At one point, one of the ill-fated customers is like, you're the customer, you're paying him to serve you, which is the way it should be. But it just seemed like they were mean the whole time. And that's perfectly in keeping with what Hawthorne and the chef ultimately had planned. But that's not the way it should be.
They certainly weren't rude to us. But there is a certain pretense that they maintain. And maybe they looked sideways at Brian a little bit when he requested a ginger ale and declined the cocktail. Right? So, but they definitely weren't rude. They treaded a fine line in the menu, right? Like, it's like when you pay someone to be mean to you. It's like theatrical mean. Like we're going to be mean without being outright rude until the suicide moment where you're like, okay, this is squarely in a very, very dark place.
Right. For me, that was when it went off the rails and became a parody of sorts. Like it wasn't the suicide as much as it was when stuff's going down and after the dude, I think it was after the dude shot himself and Nicholas Holt's just eating like with gusto. And I was like, obviously this is a completely different type of movie. It's not like a horror movie, or it's not meant to be dramatic or taken seriously, where we can view the idea of Chef's Restaurant as being funny, kinda.
Right. Did you hold out hope for a moment, thinking because of Nicholas Holt's reaction that this was a piece of theater and that was a staged suicide?
Absolutely.
And not really? Yeah, okay.
They would come in like with little bread or whatever and scrape up the brains that were strawberry jelly and cream cheese or something.
And then like smear it on bread for
right?
you
Like
or
a
something?
like a murder bread plate. And so we're talking about the rudeness or whatever, and the fact that you're limited to one cocktail, and Brian's like, ginger ale, please. But there's something to the artifice and the theatricality or whatever, where the wine is like hyper decanted. What do? Use an immersion blender or something to hyper decant it? It's absurd because, again, you're paying for, and this is not the thing where the customer is always right or whatever because of the designs of this restaurant. But I don't care how much I'm paying. If I walked into the restaurant and they were like, this is a breadless bread plate, I'd be like, F you, dude. That's not going to fly with me.
So you related to Anya Taylor-Joy's character, where you're like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah, she was the cheeseburger eating every person. So in interviews, Ray Fiennes talked about the kind of food that he likes, and he says it's not to this level. It's more simplistic, just simple ingredients prepared very simply in a way that's delicious and not with the theatricality. And so while I've had you and I have had lots of fancy meals, prefix menus, stuff like that, upscale dining experiences, some of which the drinks are specifically paired and everything, and it's like dinner theater. I never got into the ultra yuppie, stupid eclair served on a shovel, or there was something like served in VHS cases or something ridiculous that I saw recently, or in a shoe. And that's the part that really annoys me.
Served in a shoe?
I'm not kidding. There was something served in like a boot or something.
Have you been to a Michelin star restaurant?
Yes.
Then you've been to the base camp of Mount Bullshit.
Oh, sure. To the base, but on the mountain where anything goes and all rules are off. At base camp, there's still some law and order. Like there are bodies littered all over Everest because there's no regulation. You can do whatever you want. And these high-end restaurants, you can do whatever you want. But in the base camp, the laws of Nepal still apply. And if you murder somebody, you're probably going to be caught and prosecuted for it.
Okay. Good use of that analogy.
So I like food that's focused on, the flavor of food and not the dumb aspect. I mean, I hope that people understand there's a difference between food that is plated specifically, and, aesthetics are great. And if food looks pretty, it's great. But if it's plated, it definitely feels purposely ironic. Yeah, the whole point is that the food is unnecessarily expensive. You and I grew up on fast foods and cheap food and stuff, and the idea of paying for the meal, in my opinion's gotta reflect the quality of the food itself. It's not medieval times up in here. We're looking to eat delicious stuff. And so, at one point he said, this is what you're paying for. And $1,200 for a high concept meal, if it's like a weird snuff dinner where they're eventually going to cook and eat one or more of the people involved, that's kind of cheap. Like that's a fairly good price.
I was about to say $1,200 didn't seem all that unreasonable.
Right? The boat fuel and the fact that they're going to have to import all that stuff onto the island, it wasn't terrible. And that sounds horribly bougie of us to say. It
really does. So bougie. But I think for a high-end Last Supper type meal, people probably could have and probably would have been elastic enough to pony up, especially like the tech bros and the celebrity poser and the rich couple. Like, they don't care. It's about the bragging rights and the experience and the exclusivity of it all. So, what do they care if it's $1,200 or $2,500, which I think would have been a more realistic price. But it sounds like your philosophy toward food, at least like high-end food experiences, would be it's got to be grub. Like, you got to... It's satisfying, food experience, and not just like picking at or pecking at like breadless bread plates.
And here's the distinction. It doesn't have to be exotic. It doesn't have to be Indiana Jones chilled monkey brains for you to appreciate it. It actually has to taste good. And in some cases, maybe not $1,200 a plate, but in some cases paying $100 or $150 or even $200 for dinner, sometimes the worth is reflected in the taste of the food and the quality of the food. Because you can get a hamburger anywhere, but the hamburger, like where revenge is a dish best served cold, or you escaped the murder dinner or whatever, that hamburger was totally worth it. And no matter how high end, I've heard chefs all agree that American cheese is the best cheese for a cheeseburger.
American meaning like Kraft singles?
Yeah.
Because those have made a wild resurgence in our household. Homemade Egg McMuffin with Morningstar sausage patty. Oh, American cheese. All melty.
But I do think this movie, the purpose of it is to point out the absurdity of the high class who talk, even if you know your stuff, even if you're like Janet McTeer's character who's a food critic and is on her game. Still, it highlights the absurdity of restaurant criticism and the lengths that people will go to establish their idea of being refined through what they put in their mouth.
I'm glad you bring that up, though, because I found it to be a little confusing. This movie was both in fan service to foodies, featuring genuinely well-crafted dishes prepared by world-renowned chefs.
Actual world-renowned chef. They have the only woman who's ever received 3 Michelin stars in her restaurant preparing all the dishes.
See, that's what I'm saying. This was legit, and it was in fan service to foodies, but also a critique of food culture. And it felt a little two-faced in that way. Are you saying, these are the highlights of the culture that you are a fan of, and also these are the horrible parts, the dark parts of this food culture where people are obsessed and the people who come to it are just bad people for whatever reason.
Yeah, it's broadest appeal. You're giving the foodies the foodie culture stuff that they want, and they identify with that stuff. And the people who are like, this is absurd, they can watch this movie as a parody. I think about American History X. I think that DVD is a big seller among neo-Nazis who are like, oh, I love that Nazi movie. That's awesome, right? Regardless of the comeuppance and the inevitable moral lesson imparted at the end of that movie. You just overlook that stuff. If you're the Nazi, it's all about the cool scenes where before he learns his lesson. And then for the rest of us, it's like, oh yeah, that was a Nazi movie, but it had the morals, so it makes it justifiable.
Okay. So you just choose to look the other way when they're actually making fun of you as a foodie?
Yeah, exactly.
Or maybe you are the type of foodie that has a thick enough skin where you can take a searing look at yourself.
Searing, but also you could be a Nicholas Hoult level foodie where you're like, oh man, to die in service of the art, to be part of the meal, to be part of the grand plan of the 7 deadly sins represented a la 7 or whatever would be to go down in history with some notoriety, to be remembered as such.
So I get that Nicholas Hoult was a pretentious foodie wannabe, his character, but what was his archetype? Like, I totally got the power-tasting tech bros, the food critic representing kind of the urchin of the food world, and she even had like her companion Barnacle, her hanger-oner who was hanging out. There's the celebrity poser, name dropper. What did he call himself? He was like, I'm a name-dropping whore or something.
Oh, yeah.
And then there's like the rich people who ironically have no taste. Like, what archetype was Tyler?
While I don't care to deconstruct each and every one, I do know that the writers mentioned that each of the 7 deadly sins was in fact represented, which is what made this feel like 7. And I thought ultimately they were going to be sacrificed for their sins and made into dishes representing those sins. And didn't you think that the whole time everybody was going to be eaten, or they were going to have to eat each other?
No, I don't think my mind was going there, but I was definitely thinking that the smokehouse protein maturation shed was underutilized.
Yeah, but I do think we were supposed to assume that those were human entrails, human sausages and stuff that had to be eaten at a specific time. To answer your question, I'm not sure what Nicholas Hoult's character represented, whether it be pride or envy. Probably envy. I guess he was the person who was most concerned about Chef hating him, and yet for some reason still took pictures, and I get how that came around. But if you want to be perceived, very particularly if you're the person that has been in correspondence with Chef the whole time, and if he didn't know the angle or whatever, risking the pictures for the gram is probably not the way to go to curry favor. Curry, man, I just see that was a self-assist. I dunked my own bank shot.
You just threw it up there and then dunked it in?
Yep.
Yeah, I think that he probably had some like auto feed, and if that was his last moment, if that was his last broadcast to social media and the world, right? He'd risk it. You can't really fault Tyler for being a devotee, like he's a dork and all that kind of stuff, but you kind of have to hate him for pulling an innocent victim into the mix because he can't be seated alone.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that was part of his whatever sin he represented. But he was the guy who loved the idea of the chef and being an upstanding sort of personage. You know, he was dining among notables, the esteemed food critic and the movie star, and the couple who that was like their whole thing. He wanted to be one of those people. Couldn't do it alone, but also had the prostitute in the mix, because I guess she would look good on his arm and represent well if his girlfriend left him or something and he needed another person. He seemed like the douchey dude that was his MO, the whole culture, and wanting to look refined and can't be a food critic, can't be a head chef like his idol, so he is the consummate enjoyer.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
This episode is brought to you by Paramount Plus. Ewan McGregor stars as Count Alexander Rostov in A Gentleman in Moscow, the new limited series based on the best-selling novel. Stream it on March 29th with the Paramount Plus with Showtime plan. Visit ParamountPlus.com to try it free.
And Anya Taylor-Joy is striking looking. Then you put her in basically lingerie and like Doc Marten boots. And then you're like, okay, you know that she doesn't fit in here. Even when she was in her coat and stuff, I was like, those boots are off. You can tell so much by a person's shoes.
Definitely the shoes. Women's fashion is as absurd as high-end novelty foods. That dress wasn't even a dress. It's a good thing she didn't have, it was only the dudes, because she wouldn't have lasted out in the Hunger Games in the island running around.
But yeah, it's true. But just like when you just think about the treatment of the Margot character, like side by side, if you look at Chef, who's obviously this despicable person, he's almost less despicable than Tyler. Like Chef has a no judgment service worker affinity with Margot that you kind of have to appreciate from him.
Yeah, he was a fry jockey. They came from the same place. One of them kept it a little bit more real than the other. He was like he was putting on airs. He was the tar of tasting. Tar of tasting?
Yep.
There's alliterative. Get it? Anyway, a curious thing, listening to many interviews by Ray Fiennes, people often asked him, are you a foodie? Is that your thing? And he talked about how he prefers simple food, but he refused to condemn Chef as a bad person, as the villain. He said he was misunderstood and hardworking and sort of a genius with a dark side or something. But it was weird that he kept, how he plays so evil. How can you be typecast as so evil, because of his history with Harry Potter and stuff. And he's like, I don't think Chef is evil, which is weird. I don't know if it was a method thing, but very curious perspective.
Yeah, I guess if you play him evil, then he becomes a caricature. And if you play him as a sympathetic character who I think ultimately is just depressed, he's like reached, what do you call it? The end of his art?
Art at the edge of the abyss.
I mean, when you reach that point, he's probably mentally ill.
You think? But not just him. Everybody. Elsa was nutso. And all the sous chefs and stuff were obviously troubled.
It would have been really unrealistic to think that all of these people would sacrifice themselves and go down with the chef unless they were in a cult.
Fully
island
cult.
They planted those seeds pretty well in the tour of the island, right? You see the Quonset hut in which they all live with the exposed toilet. Do you notice the toilet in the foreground?
No.
there was like in the foreground of like the wide shot of the hut when they're all like, oh, so you like esprit de corps, or you like live here or whatever. There was like a exposed like prison toilet that I'm assuming they all used and scrubbed meticulously after the fact.
Man.
Yeah, so very culty, and they were obviously all drinking the Kool-Aid and ready to go down with the ship.
Yep, Heaven's Gate style. It's like they took the cult devotees and then taught them to cook, and
right.
So it's called cult first and then cook later.
So they nurtured that in them, and I guess this was his whole master plan to just take them down in this fiery wreck. It was so funny. I think the next day after watching the menu, which did stick with Brian and me for a bit, the girls and I made s'mores over our portable campfire that we got for Christmas, which is literally like a big candle with briquettes. And all I could think of was that this was just like an assault on my taste buds. In fact, we were out of graham crackers, so we used Oreos instead.
Man, that's genius. But at the same time, I did take issue with the other problem with the high-end food stuff is this concept of deconstructing foods.
Yep.
Oh, God, I hate that. So give me food, put it in front of me that's ready to eat, that's mixed, that's marinated, that's absolutely appropriate, because otherwise it's a gimmick. And the ultimate deconstructed food is s'mores. I kind of get it as a concept if they give it to you at Gyukaku, because you can roast the marshmallows over the flame, but me having to cook my own food, no, you're here to cook my food. I guess Korean barbecue is an exception, but when I come out of Korean barbecue or Gyukaku, I'm exhausted. My arms are all sore, and I have to cook for everyone for some reason. S'mores as a concept only could have worked for the end of this movie, but it's happened a couple times at restaurants where you pay a lot for a meal, and then they're like s'mores at the end, and I'm like, no, not s'mores. That's a little bit too simple. But then again, I've had s'mores where the chef made handmade the marshmallows and stuff, and that's a little bit more interesting. But it bugged me, except how fitting it was. You could actually see the marshmallows charring and stuff and browning when they were wearing the marshmallow coats and they were burning at the end. So in that way, it was appropriate. And you see the lady's horrified look when she's wearing her chocolate hat.
Yeah, and it's like melting down her face.
Yeah, but Ralph Fiennes, obviously, as Voldemort, and apparently, I can't substantiate this, I don't know how far they got in the process, but Daniel Radcliffe was seriously considered for Nicholas Holt's character, which would have made a Harry Potter reunion, and that would have been cool.
Whoa.
And in perfect roles, right, for these. Well, I don't know, actually, Harry would have lost this round. Spoiler, he triumphs in the Harry Potter series, but I was very disappointed at the end that it ended up being s'mores and not like a Lord Voldemort or something for dessert.
Voldemort. I thought it was kind of random, but visually compelling, right? Again, with the chocolate fezzes melting down their faces in this very emotional, kind of bloody, dark blood-esque tears. But I did think that at that point, the clients, they went down without a fight. Like, they were mysteriously resigned to their fate. Like, they never really put up a big fight in the stink. Maybe like halfway with the fake Coast Guard guy.
Right, and the chair through the window, or trying to put the chair through the window.
I mean, don't you die like clawing and screaming at the door in your chocolate fez and your marshmallow poncho?
Me, absolutely, I think, anyway. But this was and leading the charge was Fingerless Larry, who was made an example of, but then who still ate. And why would he continue the rigmarole of this dinner party? We had to go through the whole course. Because this movie was coursed like a dinner, we knew we had to see the end, and dessert was going to be a final flourish or whatever. But yeah, they were just sort of waiting, and not even biding their time kind of waiting. Everyone except for the Tyler character who checked out, which was appropriate, just kind of waited it out. They were all drinking the Kool-Aid. It was kind of Event Horizon, like all hellish, or everybody's resigned to the hell orgy by the end of it.
It was like there was some message in Margot being the only character who actually had a will to live.
Yeah, she's us, right? The everyman, the cheeseburger eating, one who can see through the artifice. Because everyone else was live by the sword, die by the sword, or the skewer.
So why did Chef Slowick let her live?
I think he saw the kinship in that she was the person who could escape, who wasn't bound. He imprisoned himself on that island. He lived there. Everybody else lived there. His entire construct of person, his personality was built around that island and everybody on it. He was going to go down with the ship, not just because he was the captain, but because he was the ship. The ship was, that whole island was sort of him, and she was not. I think he envied her ability to cast away everything, had nothing really to lose, and would be content not having a claim or being recognized for the kind of person who would go to these kinds of meals and stuff. She was free to eat cheeseburgers.
Did that cheeseburger look good?
Absolutely, it looked good. You do the thing. It was a smash burger, technically speaking. You put the razor thin onions on top so that when you flip it, the onions kind of melt and disappear. Good crust. American cheese, double burger at that. It's like a hand-baked bun or whatever. It wasn't a brioche. I think it was pretty good.
Like just no frills, no condiments, no accessory. It wasn't accessorized. Yeah. It was just like a double meat down-home burger. I definitely don't consider myself a foodie because I decided last night that my favorite thing to eat in the world is classic Ruffles with homemade like powder in the sour cream onion dip.
Yeah, California dip. You were the one who taught me to dip Doritos in sour cream.
Oh, so good.
But look, I think the point is our palates are at least refined enough in adulthood to be able to appreciate when someone does either a radical thing that works or a very simple thing that evokes the natural flavors where the steak isn't drowned in ketchup or in steak sauce. Rather, you're getting the aged quality of the beef with the Malden bougie salt and the organic whole ground pepper. Because the joke goes that marriage is just you and your spouse asking each other where you want to eat over and over again until you die. And while I'm not married, we have that discussion often. Well, what do you want? And I'm like, if you died in a fiery wreck or if you never existed, I would be eating Del Taco. Like, food is food. And I love junk food as much as delicious food. And sometimes it's just not worth the effort unless someone like Chef is preparing it for me.
Is our taste refined enough to appreciate Mark Mylod's The Menu?
I understand it for what it was. I didn't crazy love it because it straddles the line between parody and food porn or whatever. Did you note that the camera angles, the slow pushes and stuff were taken directly from Chef's Table that they talked about?
Is that a television show?
Yeah. They aped that concept and the shooting style, like exactly. And so, yes, I understood it. I didn't understand the lengths that they went to. And I did get a little bit of anxiety because we talked about after the movie, well, what if Chef put you on the spot and you knew you were probably going to die? What would you have cooked on the spot to impress a Michelin chef? I don't know the answer.
You got to stick to what you know. That's when you pull out the Kraft macaroni and cheese and you're like, I can make this really good.
Right? But there are many entrances to the menu, and whichever door you come through, the menu has something to offer for you. And so, yeah, I think that I understood it, that I got it.
And what would have been seared on your tortilla for Taco Tuesday?
See, that's the thing that we talked about too, because I like the concept of what he was trying to do. This was kind of the reveal to everybody. This was pulling back the curtain and that, you are part of the meal and your sins and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, laser etching a tortilla seems like a cheat to me. I need my tortillas rustically, open fire grilled on a stone cairn or something, not laser etched with a machine. It seems like gourmet cooking with high-tech stuff is a cheat. I was like, man, the heating isn't evenly distributed. It has to be in service of the picture or the image. So this part's way more charred than that part, and it bothered me.
But an important turning point in the story, right, where we're clearly revealing that everything about this menu is premeditated and intended to be an indictment of these people and who they are, what they represent. I thought it was an interesting double entendre to suggest that the tech bros were cooking the books.
Cooking the books, man.
I wasn't sure exactly what was on Margot's tortilla, considering it was probably intended for Miss Vesterman or whatever her name was, Westerbrook. But I think that I would have been outed as a non-foodie on my tortilla. It would have been like me eating like a Tommy's chili tamale or something. And been like, we see you. We know you're not real. All right, and let's switch it up for the menu. We're going to make it a 3-star Michelin rating.
That's hard because Michelin stars are already notoriously difficult to come by. I think if you give it one Michelin star and not a Bib Gourmand, this is already a movie above and beyond. So I guess on a 3-star scale rating, I'd give it maybe a 2, a moderate 2. I could see that, you know, it's high concept and it could be seen as a parody if you're viewing it from those high levels. But I kind of saw it as more a very simple, like for the rest of us, like killing a spouse or a teacher. It's like a chef's revenge fantasy, you know, to be able to school your pretentious diners who don't understand your concepts. That's what it felt like to me. And in that way, it was perfectly fine. But I don't know that this isn't the subversive masterpiece that people perceive Silence of the Lambs to be, or any movie of a parody type similar to The Menu. It didn't feel particularly high concept. It might have been Velveeta under there.
It was just this like very craftily disguised fake cheese.
It was fine. It's fine.
Sure, I'll join you. I mean, in that scale, I think putting it at 2 stars puts it above the line. So there you have it. A 2-star rated The Menu, available on HBO Max. This episode was a request of Gladys. So shout out to Gladys. We take your requests here at Or Whatever Movies. Go to Patreon, become a movie friend, and make your request. We'll review and discuss your movie right here on Or Whatever Movies. Other ways that you can support us, go to wherever you find podcasts, give us a 5-star rating, like and subscribe to the podcast, follow us on Instagram at Or Whatever Movies. Also, we'd love to hear from you. 818-835-0473 or whatevermovies@gmail.com. We hope you enjoyed this discussion on The Menu, and bon appetit.
Welcome, explorers of the human experience. This is Let's Talk Soul, and I'm your host, Claudia Monticelli. We're not afraid of the great mysteries of existence here. Soul versus consciousness, we're on it. Spirituality versus science, we've got that covered too. Join us in navigating these profound topics with wisdom, curiosity, and a dash of audacity. Whether you're a spiritual veteran or just starting your journey, Let's Talk Soul is your passport to the unknown. Let's Talk Soul, diving into the depths of the human spirit. Subscribe now wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, it's Tim from 50 Years of Music with 50-Year-Old White Guys, the comedy podcast you had no idea you needed. Join Ben, Jeff, and me as we continue our musical road trip back through the years and around the globe. See, just when you thought all white guys were like Joe Rogan, you come across 3 educators trying to remember when we were cool.
50 Years of Music with 50-Year-Old White Guys.
Electricast.